The hologram flickered to life, its cold, indifferent blue light casting an eerie glow over the command center. Captain Nicholas Hayden stood at the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back, watching the projection. The faces of the Galactic Council appeared before him, their features cold and alien, their voices like thunder in the silence of the room. Humanity has been deemed a threat, the Council's speaker, a tall and angular being named Eldar, spoke in a tone that carried no emotion. The instability of their species, their aggression, their tendency to expand beyond their capacity, all pose a risk to the peaceful coexistence of this galaxy. Nicholas clenched his fists, jaw tight. He had heard rumors, of course, whispers in the corridors of power, stories that the galaxy's oldest civilizations had grown weary of humanity's constant push into the stars. But this was an order, a decree. His heart sank. Therefore, Eldar continued, the Council has voted to initiate the protocol. Earth will be neutralized. All human presence in the galaxy will be eradicated to prevent further destabilization. Nicholas felt the blood drain from his face. The protocol? It was the ultimate measure. Extermination. His home, his people, destroyed by a force far beyond their control. Is there a plan for resistance? Nicholas asked, his voice betraying no emotion, though the fire in his chest burned. His hand clenched at his side, fighting back the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Eldar's gaze flickered briefly to the other members of the Council. Human resistance is irrelevant, Eldar replied coldly. Your species' actions have made this inevitable. The decision is final. The hologram flickered once more before cutting off, leaving Nicholas standing alone, the room's dim lights now reflecting the chaos building inside his mind. For a moment, all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart in his ears. He was the leader of humanity's fleet, of its people, and yet he had no power here. He paced the command center, trying to collect his thoughts. The Council had always been the galaxy's most powerful force, an alliance of ancient, incredibly advanced civilizations that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia. The fact that they saw humanity as a threat wasn't just personal, it was a judgment on everything they had built. But Nicholas wasn't ready to let go of Earth. Not yet. Captain Hayden, a voice called, interrupting his thoughts. Nicholas turned to find Lieutenant Mara Grayson standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Sir, you need to see this. He followed Mara down a long, narrow corridor, passing crew members who glanced at him with uncertainty. His reputation as a fierce commander was well known, but the protocol had shattered that confidence. The galaxy's greatest fleet, humanity's final line of defense, was about to be obliterated by enemies far beyond their comprehension. Inside the operations room, Nicholas was met with a stream of reports and data from their military satellites. The sky above Earth was now crawling with enemy ships. Hundreds of massive warships, each one more advanced and powerful than anything humanity could muster. An invasion was imminent. Nicholas narrowed his eyes as he scanned the readings. We don't have time for this, he muttered, turning to Mara. How long until the first wave hits? Mara hesitated. Less than a day. Nicholas exhaled sharply, hands running over his face. Damn it! He stepped to the console and began working, his mind moving faster than his hands could keep up. This was it. This was the fight for survival. No more negotiations. No more peaceful diplomacy. He turned to Mara. We're not going down without a fight. Start organizing the fleet. We need to rally every ship we have left and every human who can fight. I'll take command of the defense. We can't let them have Earth without making them regret it. Mara nodded, her eyes fierce. Yes, sir. Nicholas walked to the command deck, a plan forming in his mind. If they had even the slightest chance, it had to be now. The protocol might have been decided, but humanity hadn't given up yet. He glanced out at the view screen. The Earth, shining brightly against the blackness of space, was still there, still home. And it wasn't going down without a fight. Subscribe now and see what happens next, as humanity's last stand begins. The command center was alive with chaos. The bright screens and flashing lights were a stark contrast to the silence that had lingered in the room just hours before. The Earth was facing extinction, and the people who had once believed their biggest threat was interstellar politics were now fighting for their very survival. Nicholas Hayden stood at the center of the chaos, his mind whirling as he gave orders to his officers. He wasn't just commanding a fleet anymore, he was leading a revolution, a rebellion against the galaxy's most powerful entities, and they were coming for Earth. "Captain," Mara said, her voice sharp with urgency, "we've got incoming ships, hundreds of them. They're moving faster than expected." Nicholas glanced at the tactical screen. The enemy fleet, a coalition of advanced alien races, was rapidly advancing towards Earth. They didn't need to be fast. Their weapons alone could obliterate entire fleets. "How long until they're in firing range?" Nicholas asked, his voice grim. "Less than 3 hours," Mara replied, her eyes scanning the data. "We don't have much time." Nicholas clenched his jaw. His first instinct was to fall back, to retreat, and protect humanity's resources. But there was no more running. Earth's fate was in his hands, and he wasn't about to let an entire species be wiped out without giving everything he had. "We're going to make them regret this," Nicholas said, his voice low but filled with fire. He turned to his officers. "Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. I want every ship ready to fight, no matter the odds." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we go head-to-head with the entire fleet? We're outmatched." "We'll make it work," Nicholas said, his eyes steely with determination. "We've got one advantage they don't: human ingenuity. They might have better tech, but we have something they can't replicate: our drive to survive. We'll fight like hell. We have no other choice." He turned away from Mara, his mind already planning their first move. The alien fleet was too big, too powerful for a direct assault. But if he could outsmart them, use their arrogance against them, humanity might stand a chance. Nicholas activated the communications system, sending a signal to the fleet. "Listen up, people," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "This is our final chance. They want to wipe us out. They think we're weak, but we know better. We're going to take the fight to them, and we're going to win. We have no other option." The officers on the comms nodded in agreement, their resolve clear. Nicholas took a deep breath and walked over to the main console. "Mara, get me the schematics for their fleet. I want to know everything: weaknesses, defensive positions, their strategy, anything we can use." Mara moved quickly, pulling up data on the enemy ships. "We've got a lot of data, but it's fragmented. It's hard to get a clear picture of their exact capabilities." "I don't need a perfect picture," Nicholas said, his mind racing. "I just need enough to turn the tide." As Mara worked, Nicholas stepped over to the view screen. The Earth loomed large in the distance, its blue oceans and green continents shining brightly against the vastness of space. For a brief moment, the weight of what was happening hit him hard. But he pushed the feeling down. They were going to survive. He would make sure of it. 3 hours later, the first shots were fired. Nicholas stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Cerberus, watching as the enemy fleet approached. His heart pounded in his chest as the distant ships grew larger on the view screen. "Steady," Nicholas muttered to himself. "Steady." He knew the stakes. Every life on Earth, every man, woman, and child was depending on him and his crew. "Captain, enemy ships are entering firing range," Mara called out, her voice strained. "They're locking on." Nicholas turned sharply to face her. "Activate all defenses. Don't wait for them to fire first. Engage on my mark." "Mark?" Mara shouted. The Cerberus fired first, sending a barrage of missiles toward the approaching fleet. The enemy retaliated almost instantly, their weapons blazing across the dark void. Explosions erupted, shaking the ship violently. Nicholas gritted his teeth, his hands tightening on the console. "All ships engage. We're not backing down." The battle raged on. The enemy was relentless, their ships sleek and powerful, each one a testament to their superiority. But humanity wasn't backing down. They fought with everything they had. Alex didn't have the advanced weaponry or the sheer numbers the enemy did, but he had something far more dangerous: human ingenuity. He barked orders, directing the fleet to outmaneuver the enemy, using decoys, false signals, and tactical retreats to keep the invaders off balance. And when the enemy fleet fell for their first trap, humanity's surprise weapons hit hard, damaging key enemy vessels. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was enough to prove that humanity would never go down without a fight. As the battle continued, Nicholas knew this wasn't just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy who humanity truly was. "We may be small," he said softly, his gaze fixed on the stars outside, "but we are far from weak." And as the enemy fleet pulled back, nursing its wounds, Nicholas knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its strength. And now, they had a chance to prove that strength was more than just a weapon, it was their will to survive. The battle was far from over, but the tide had shifted. Humanity's unexpected resilience had stunned the invading forces. Nicholas Hayden stood in the Cerberus's command center, his hands clenched tightly behind his back as he surveyed the damage reports. The enemy fleet had retreated, but they weren't defeated. Not yet. "We've slowed them down," Mara said, her voice steady but filled with frustration as she ran another round of tactical simulations. "But they'll be back in hours. They'll reassemble, resupply. They've got the resources. We don't." Nicholas nodded, his mind whirring. They had bought some time, but only just. The enemy had underestimated humanity's ingenuity, but now that they were aware of humanity's capacity for surprise, they would adapt quickly. Nicholas knew they needed more than surprise tactics. They needed something bigger. He looked at the tactical display. The Cerberus and a handful of remaining human ships had done the impossible. They'd disrupted the enemy's advance and bought Earth precious time. But there was only so much time left. The real question was, what would humanity do with that time? Nicholas turned to his crew, his gaze steely. "We need to hit them before they can regroup. This can't wait." A murmur of agreement filled the room. Everyone knew the stakes, and for the first time, they were taking the fight to the enemy. They moved quickly, launching every ship they had into the fray. But this time, their strategy was different. Instead of holding back or reacting to the enemy's moves, they would take the initiative, an offensive that would force the invaders to play by humanity's rules. They launched decoys, created false signals, and sent out small strikes on key enemy vessels, disrupting their command structure. Every move felt like a gamble. On the battlefield, chaos erupted once again. Explosions lit the dark expanse of space as the human fleet weaved between the much larger, more powerful alien ships. Nicholas watched, eyes narrowed, as their ships launched strike after strike, hitting weak points in the enemy's formations, cutting through their defenses. But it wasn't enough. The alien fleet was more advanced, and despite their best efforts, the humans were always at a disadvantage. "I need something more." Nicholas muttered, turning to Mara. "Is there any way to tap into their command networks? Find their weak spots?" Mara worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. "I think I can try something. It'll be risky, but we might be able to infiltrate their command systems using a backdoor from their own ships." Nicholas's mind raced. If they could get in and disrupt the enemy's communication, it could give them the edge they needed. It was a long shot, but right now, humanity didn't have the luxury of playing it safe. "Do it," he ordered. Mara's fingers flew across the console as the Cerberus charged into the fray once more. They had no time to waste. The alien fleet was already preparing for its next offensive. Every second counted. If they couldn't hit them hard enough this time, the battle for Earth might be lost. "We're in," Mara said, her voice crackling with tension. "I'm in their system. I'm sending a virus into their command structure." Nicholas's eyes flickered to the monitor as Mara's code began working. The enemy fleet's movements started to slow, then halt. They were frozen. "Now, Captain," Mara shouted, her voice thick with excitement. "They can't communicate. They can't regroup." Nicholas didn't hesitate. "All ships full assault. Hit them now." The Cerberus and the remaining fleet launched a full-scale attack on the alien forces, their movements erratic, unexpected. The enemy was confused. They couldn't coordinate, couldn't respond. Human ingenuity had struck again. The battle stretched on for hours, but by the end, humanity had done what seemed impossible. They had crippled the invaders' fleet. Alien ships, once so powerful and unyielding, lay broken and drifting in space, their command systems shattered. Nicholas stood before his crew, breathing heavily, sweat slick on his brow. The Cerberus had survived. Earth had survived. "We did it," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. "They underestimated us, and now they know who we are." Mara stepped forward, exhaustion on her face, but a fierce smile tugging at her lips, "and they'll never forget it." Nicholas nodded, eyes scanning the damaged hulls on the display. "We've proven something important today. Humanity doesn't need to be the strongest to win. We just need to fight smarter." "Exactly," Mara agreed. "And we have a lot more to fight for." But as the battle ended, Nicholas knew the fight wasn't over. They had won a critical victory. But the war was far from finished. The alien forces would regroup, and there were more threats out there in the unknown reaches of space. But this time, humanity was ready. They had proven that they could survive, adapt, and fight back, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. The feeling of victory was short-lived. As the Cerberus hovered above Earth's atmosphere, Nicholas Hayden stood on the command deck, eyes fixed on the monitor. His mind still raced, adrenaline still flowing, but the weight of what lay ahead hung heavy in the air. Earth was safe for now, but the battle was far from over. "We've won a crucial battle," Nicholas said to the room, his voice steady but grave. "But we need more. The war isn't over until we prove to the galaxy that humanity is not a threat, but a force to be reckoned with." Mara stood at his side, scanning the incoming data reports. "We've crippled their fleet, but there are still pockets of resistance, and their reinforcements are coming. We can't afford to wait." Nicholas nodded. "We can't wait. We fight now, while we have the upper hand. We take the fight to them." On the surface of Earth, panic had already begun to set in. Though the immediate threat was repelled, humanity was not prepared for the full scale of war. With millions of civilians still in danger, it was time for the rebellion to truly begin. Nicholas was no longer just commanding a fleet, he was leading a revolution. Humanity's survival rested on more than just their ability to fight. It rested on their ability to unite, something the aliens had failed to understand. Humans had been fractured before the invasion, divided by nations, by politics, by beliefs. But in war, those lines had blurred. In war, humanity had found a new strength. "We'll need to rally every human soldier and ally we can find," Nicholas said, turning to his team. "We're not just fighting aliens anymore. We're fighting for our future, one where we stand together, not divided." He turned to a communications officer, his voice firm. "Get the message out. Every corner of Earth needs to hear this. Humanity is standing together. We fight for Earth. We fight for each other." Within hours, resistance cells across the world began to unite. Governments, previously paralyzed by fear and confusion, suddenly found themselves stepping up, coordinating efforts for global defense and rebuilding. The battle had ignited something within the people of Earth, a sense of unity, of purpose. Nations that had once stood in opposition were now allies, bound together by the same cause. Nicholas stood in a command room filled with officers and strategists from all walks of life, scientists, soldiers, politicians, each now working as one. The galaxy's most advanced species had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, their ability to adapt, to unite, and to fight for each other when everything else fell apart. "We've got a chance to rewrite the history books," Mara said as the room grew silent, every person listening intently. "We've shown them that we can stand against their might. Now let's show them we can win." Nicholas gave a resolute nod. "Prepare the next strike. We'll meet them on our terms, and this time they won't have the upper hand." The first coordinated strike took place 2 days later. A task force made up of human soldiers, ships, and aliens who had defected from their previous allegiances descended on the remaining pockets of alien resistance. The operation was swift, precise, and deadly, exactly how humanity operated best. As the battle raged, Nicholas and Mara stood side by side on the Cerberus's bridge, watching as the battle unfolded below them. They had taken a risk, and they had made it work. "We're making them pay," Nicholas muttered, his hands gripping the armrests of the captain's chair. "We're showing them that we will not be erased." Mara met his gaze, determination in her eyes, "And we won't be." The war, though still ongoing, had shifted. No longer were the aliens in full control. Humanity had not only survived, they were fighting back, not with brute force, but with intelligence, strategy, and unity. The humans had shown their true strength. Their greatest weapon wasn't their military might, but their refusal to be defeated. As the final waves of the attack concluded, Nicholas looked out at the stars, the cold emptiness that had once been so terrifying, now a symbol of humanity's resilience. They had been pushed to the brink, but they had fought back, and they would continue to fight, for Earth, for their future. "We're not just surviving," Nicholas said quietly, his gaze unwavering. "We're winning." And for the first time, humanity had taken control of its own destiny, proving to the galaxy that they were not the weak, primitive species others had once believed them to be. The final battle had begun. Nicholas stood on the Cerberus's bridge, staring at the looming mass of enemy ships in the distance, the alien fleet. What remained of it was regrouping, preparing for one final strike to obliterate Earth once and for all. The reinforcements had arrived, and the time for humanity's survival was running out. "We don't have much time," Mara said, her voice tense as she analyzed the data. "They're already launching a full assault. Our defenses are stretched thin." Nicholas clenched his fists, eyes narrowed in steely determination. "We've fought too hard to lose now. We need to hit them hard, and we need to do it fast." The enemy ships, massive and menacing, hovered in perfect formation, their weapons primed and ready. The Cerberus and the remaining human ships were nowhere near a match in terms of size or firepower, but they had something the aliens didn't: the will to survive. Nicholas turned to the rest of the crew, each person standing at their stations, ready for what came next. "We've learned something in this fight," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of everything they had fought for. "We've learned that the most powerful weapon we have is our ability to keep going, no matter what. We don't back down, we don't surrender, and we never stop fighting. Not today, not ever." The crew nodded, their faces resolute. They had come this far. They had lost so much, but they had found something they had never expected: hope. And now, that hope was what would carry them through the final fight. The battle raged on, explosive and chaotic. The human fleet darted between enemy vessels, taking advantage of every gap in their defenses. They had no choice but to be creative, using everything at their disposal, every trick, every tactic they could muster. Their ships were smaller, faster, but they were relentless. Nicholas commanded the Cerberus with a calm fury. The ship's weapons fired in sync with his orders, targeting weak points in the alien ship's hulls. They were making progress, slowly but surely. "We've damaged their command ship," one of the officers called out. "It's losing power." "Keep pushing," Nicholas shouted. "Don't stop now." But as the Cerberus struck another blow, the enemy retaliated. A massive blast hit the Cerberus's port side, throwing the ship off course. Sparks flew from the control panel as the ship rocked violently. "We've lost power to the port engine," Mara called, her voice strained. "We're drifting." Nicholas gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They had to finish this. They couldn't afford to lose now, not when they were so close. The enemy fleet was falling apart, but the final blow hadn't been dealt. The command ship, though heavily damaged, still had the firepower to wipe out what remained of the human fleet. They had to end it now. "We're going to need a final push," Nicholas said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "Prepare the remaining ships for a full assault. We're going to break their command ship once and for all." Mara looked at him, concern in her eyes. "What are you suggesting?" Nicholas met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "I'm suggesting that I'm going to board their flagship." The room fell silent. The idea was insane, but it was the only way. Nicholas had been to hell and back for Earth, and if this was what it took to save humanity, he would do it, no matter the cost. Mara's expression softened. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Nicholas replied firmly. "We all do. I'm not going to let Earth fall, not while I'm still breathing." He turned to his crew. "Prepare for a final strike. I'll board their ship and disable their core. I need full support on the Cerberus. We fight until the last breath." The final moments of the battle were a blur of motion. Nicholas, with a team of hand-picked soldiers, boarded the enemy flagship in a daring assault. They fought their way through corridors and alien forces, relying on their skill and sheer determination to make it to the heart of the ship. "We're almost there," Nicholas said, his voice tight with exertion. The final corridor stretched out ahead, the heart of the alien flagship pulsating with power. The command center was within reach. As they breached the final door, the enemy commander, once so confident, so sure of their victory, stood waiting. The battle had been won, but not yet completed. Nicholas stepped forward, weapon drawn. "This is it." The alien commander's eyes glowed with fury. "You cannot win. You will be erased." Nicholas's response was simple. "We don't get erased. We fight. We always fight." The battle inside the command center was fierce and swift. The enemy commander fell, and with a final push, Nicholas planted explosives at the core of the flagship's engine systems. The countdown began. Nicholas and his team ran back through the ship, barely avoiding the explosions that rocked the flagship. They reached the escape pods, breathless and battered as the countdown neared its final seconds. "We're out of here!" Nicholas shouted as the escape pod launched, watching the enemy flagship erupt in a brilliant explosion behind them. The human fleet cheered, but Nicholas knew the fight wasn't over. There was still much to rebuild, but Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. The days after the battle were filled with mourning and triumph. The enemy was defeated, but the cost had been immense. Earth was left scarred, but there was hope. Humanity had proven its resilience. Nicholas stood once more on the command deck, looking out at the stars. The war was over. For now. But the universe had learned a powerful lesson. Humanity would never be erased, and they would always fight. Together.